The world of wrestling has given us icons like The Rock, John Cena, Hulk Hogan, and many more. However, for every wrestler who becomes a megastar, there are dozens who end up ruining their lives. From getting arrested to battling addictions and being blacklisted by every major wrestling promotion, this is what happened to these forgotten WWE wrestlers who ruined their own career. Kicking off our list with the wrestler who was supposed to be the next Goldberg. Ryback burst onto the scene in 2012, and the company pushed him hard right out of the gate. Fans were eating it up as the big guy racked up wins and built an undefeated streak. By October 2012, he was already challenging CM Punk for the WWE Championship at Hell in a Cell. However, instead of being his crowning moment, that match turned out to be the beginning of the end for the powerhouse. Ryback lost and never regained his momentum. Punk himself later went on Colt Cabana's podcast and called Ryback dangerous in the ring, saying he was reckless and unsafe to work with. WWE kept trying to make Ryback work. They paired him with Paul Heyman, gave him the Intercontinental Championship, and even put him on the winning Survivor Series team in 2014. But the momentum was gone. However, the real story was brewing behind the scenes. Ryback started complaining publicly about WWE's pay structure, and that didn't sit well with management. He went home over contract disputes and never came back. WWE officially parted ways with him in August 2016, and things kept getting worse. After leaving, Ryback took his frustrations online and absolutely torched the company for years. He buried Vince McMahon, ripped Triple H's booking decisions, and criticized everything about the company. The final straw came when he made insensitive comments about Vince McMahon's mother after she passed away. He wrestled a few indie dates between 2016 and 2018, but hasn't stepped in a ring since. These days, Ryback has legally changed his name to Ryback Reeves and has moved away from wrestling entirely. Now he focuses on his supplement business and has become a mukbang creator on YouTube. He's also revealed he can't wrestle anymore due to serious injuries, including permanent nerve damage from a botched ankle surgery and 5 rapidly degenerating discs in his back. Ryback's in-ring career is officially over, and any chance of a WWE return died long ago. The man who was supposed to be wrestling's next big star is now just another bitter troll on Twitter. But while Ryback got a taste of the main event scene, this next wrestler sealed his fate long before he tasted the bright lights. ACH was riding high when WWE signed him in February 2019. The indie veteran had made his name in Ring of Honor and was respected across the wrestling world. Vince saw potential and immediately pushed him to win NXT's breakout tournament in August 2019. He even got a championship match against Adam Cole, and everything seemed to be going his way. But then came the shirt. In late September 2019, WWE released merchandise for Jordan Myles, which was his ring name. Almost immediately, people pointed out that the design seemed insulting, and Myles went off on Twitter, calling the design a slap in the face to every African-American performer, fan, and supporter. WWE responded by saying Myles had approved the design himself and quickly changed it to something else, but that only made things worse. Myles accused the company of discrimination and didn't stop there. He went after Ring of Honor too, and his comments drew massive backlash from wrestling legends. On November 13th, Myles posted a profanity-filled video saying he quit WWE, and that ended his run in the big leagues. Since leaving, ACH has struggled to find his footing. He briefly signed with Major League Wrestling, but quit the next day, saying he was done with wrestling altogether. He came back to the indies but never recaptured his momentum. In later interviews, Myles expressed deep regret over how he handled everything and apologized to WWE. He admitted he had a meltdown and let his emotions get the best of him, but the damage was done. No major promotion has shown interest in signing him, and his name is forever tied to that controversy instead of his in-ring talent. However, Myles wasn't the only wrestler from NXT who fumbled their big push. The Velveteen Dream should have been a megastar. Patrick Clark transformed himself into this Prince-inspired character that was unlike anything fans had seen in years. He won the NXT North American Championship and had incredible feuds with Ricochet, Johnny Gargano, and Adam Cole. At only 25 years old, many saw him as a future main roster champion. The flamboyant entrance, the mind games, the theatrical promos. The fans ate it all up. But then everything came crashing down in April 2020. Allegations surfaced online that Clark had sent inappropriate messages and explicit photos on Instagram. More accusations followed in June 2020, with Clark denying everything. WWE kept Clark around for several months after the allegations, but released him in 2021. After his release, Clark's life spiraled out of control. He was arrested multiple times in Florida in 2022 for battery, trespassing, and other charges. He spent time in jail and went through a rough period by his own admission. He returned to wrestling as Velveteen Man on small indie shows, but it's a far cry from where he was headed. Despite never being charged with any crimes related to the allegations, the court of public opinion destroyed his career. However, if we're talking of wrestlers sabotaging their own career, we simply cannot leave out the man who seemed destined for greatness, but nuked his own potential. Austin Aries was one of the best wrestlers in the world during his peak run in TNA, winning both the X Division and World Heavyweight Championships. When WWE signed him in 2016, it seemed like a perfect fit. He even competed at WrestleMania 33 in his first year on the main roster. But reports of backstage issues followed him everywhere. People said he was difficult to work with, hard to get along with, and rubbed people the wrong way. WWE released him in 2017 after just over a year with the company, so Aries went back to TNA in 2018, and within 5 months, he was world champion again. Everything seemed fine until Bound for Glory 2018. That night, Austin Aries lost the Impact World Championship to Johnny Impact in the main event. After the match ended and the referee counted 3, Aries immediately stood up, completely no-selling Impact's finisher. He stormed out of the ring, and fans watching live had no idea if it was a work or if Aries had legitimately gone off script. His contract expired after Bound for Glory, and he never came back. Then in 2020, multiple women accused Aries of misconduct. He denied the allegations, but combined with his reputation for being difficult and the Bound for Glory incident, he was essentially blacklisted from every major wrestling promotion. Aries has wrestled on the indies since then and had a spot in Major League Wrestling for a while, but he's never reached the heights of his prime years again. However, Aries wasn't the only TNA alumni with a massive ego problem. Low-key should have been wrestling's next high-flying star. The guy was a legit badass who had already made a name for himself in Ring of Honor and had competed all over the world in Japan and Mexico. When WWE signed him in 2008, fans were excited to see what he could do on the big stage. But from the start, things went wrong. WWE changed his name to Kaval and put him in NXT. Despite being paired with Michelle McCool and Layla as his mentors, which didn't help him at all since fans hated Laycool, Kaval somehow won the entire season. Fans voted for him because they recognized his talent. That should have been his ticket to success. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. Creative had no plans for him, and he got lost in the shuffle. The problem wasn't just bad booking, though. Low-key had a reputation for being extremely difficult to work with. He took wrestling way too seriously, refused to lose, and rubbed people the wrong way backstage. After weeks of losing to guys like Drew McIntyre and Jack Swagger, he had enough. On December 21st, Low-key requested his release, and WWE granted it just 2 days later. After leaving the company, he went back to New Japan, but controversies kept following him. New Japan fired him in 2013 because he wrestled in a suit during a match in Fukushima without clearing it with them first. Low-key claimed it was a protest against wrestling in the area due to the nuclear disaster, but officials saw it as disrespect and blacklisted him. These days, Low-key still wrestles on smaller indie shows, but he never came close to reaching the potential everyone saw in him, and no major company is interested in hiring him. He had all the talent in the world, but could never get out of his own way. But while Low-key never got a chance to shine in WWE, let's talk about a former world champion who keeps digging his own grave. When Alberto Del Rio debuted in 2010, WWE pushed him to the moon as their next big Mexican star. He won the 2011 Royal Rumble, captured Money in the Bank, and became a multiple-time WWE and World Heavyweight Champion. For a while, it seemed like Del Rio was going to be the next big Latino star after Rey Mysterio. But behind the scenes, there were constant problems. In August 2014, Del Rio slapped a WWE employee backstage, and the company fired him immediately for unprofessional conduct. Surprisingly, WWE brought him back in October 2015 when he made a shocking return at Hell in a Cell, defeating John Cena for the United States Championship. But his second run was a disaster from the start. He no-showed events, failed a wellness test, and had a terrible attitude that made it obvious he hated working for WWE. By September 2016, the two sides mutually agreed to part ways again, less than a year into his return. But after leaving WWE, things just kept getting worse for Del Rio. Del Rio started dating Paige in 2016, and their relationship became toxic immediately. The relationship fell apart publicly and made both of them look bad. But things got much worse in May 2020 when Del Rio was arrested and charged with kidnapping. Del Rio maintained his innocence throughout, and in December 2021, the charges were dropped due to insufficient evidence. But the damage was done. Since then, Del Rio has been wrestling primarily in Mexico, but controversies have been following him. In early 2025, he got into a physical altercation with fans at a show in Tijuana and was suspended for 6 months. When WWE acquired AAA in 2025, fans thought Del Rio might make a return to the company, but things don't seem to be heading in that direction. Del Rio's career could have been legendary. Instead, his legacy is defined by backstage fights, arrests, and getting blacklisted by every promotion. But while Del Rio is still wrestling, the same can't be said about the next name on our list. Jack Gallagher was one of the feel-good stories of the 2016 Cruiserweight Classic. WWE signed him after the tournament and made him a regular on 205 Live. In early 2020, Gallagher got a new look, growing out his beard, cutting his hair shorter, and covering himself in tattoos. WWE put him in the interim Cruiserweight Championship tournament, and while he didn't win, he was still being featured regularly. But then came June 19, 2020, and everything ended in an instant. As part of the speaking out movement that swept through wrestling, a woman came forward with allegations against Gallagher from a 2014 New Year's Eve party. She claimed Gallagher got drunk and misbehaved with her during the party. WWE released Gallagher the same day the allegations went public. 4 months later, in October 2020, Gallagher finally broke his silence and admitted his behavior at the party was inappropriate. Gallagher called it an isolated incident that didn't reflect his usual behavior, but WWE had already cut ties with him. Since leaving the company, Gallagher hasn't wrestled at all. Instead, he transitioned to mixed martial arts, and let's just say things haven't been looking good in his MMA career. But speaking of MMA, let's talk about a former UFC fighter who sabotaged his career during his prime in WWE. Matt Riddle had everything going for him in 2022. He teamed with Randy Orton to form RK Bro, winning the Raw Tag Team Championship twice and becoming one of the most over acts in the company. He was feuding with the Bloodline, and his laid-back persona connected with the fans. But Riddle's personal issues kept getting in the way. The problem started during the speaking out movement in summer 2020 when independent wrestler Candy Cartwright accused Riddle. Riddle admitted to having an affair with Cartwright but denied the allegations completely. Riddle was never charged with any crimes, but the controversy followed him throughout his run. Then came the drug tests. In 2022, Riddle failed a wellness test. That was strike one. After this, Riddle failed 2 more tests, and WWE had enough. On September 22, 2023, Riddle announced his release on Twitter, thanking fans for the memories. Since leaving the company, Riddle has wrestled on the Indies, MLW, and New Japan, but has largely been in the news due to controversies. He no-showed an indie wrestling show in UK, and even made controversial comments that CM Punk's wife AJ Lee had been sleeping around with wrestlers back in the day. This led to speculations that WWE might bring Riddle back for a feud with Punk, but the company might not be willing to take that risk based on Riddle's situation. But speaking of Punk, do you remember the time CM Punk was the leader of the new Nexus? Check out this video next to find out what happened to every member of the OG Nexus.